Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. We have currently 30 national emergencies still in effect by past presidents, including this one going back to Jimmy Carter, as I said, Mr. Speaker. Why only this one? Does it bother the Democratic Party?
Well, because Donald Trump's doing it. I mean, I don't think this is very complicated.
It's really that simple, isn't it? No matter what
it's that simple.
If he cured cancer, they'd be angry at him, I'm pretty sure.
That's exactly right. Well, they'd say, why didn't you also do Alzheimer's? You know, I think you have to start with understanding that every single dollar he's going to spend has already been allocated by Congress. So he's not inventing money. He's not doing anything dictatorial. It's not a threat to the rule of law. I read some of the wilder, more hysterical comments. He has the authority to, for example, spend the money that we seize through drug asset forfeitures. He's now directing the money in this direction. Part of the reason it's called the executive branch is that he does have executive authority within a framework that Congress approves. Now, if the Democrats want to stop him, what they have to do is they would have to pass a law saying that he cannot do it. And the problem, of course, they have is it is impossible to override his veto. I mean, he would just cheerfully veto the bill. So in the absence of Congress passing a law saying you cannot do this, he is operating exactly within the principles of the system. And I think that to suggest anything else is frankly just a falsehood.
Well, it seems if 90% of America's heroin comes into the country, and we now are seeing more and more fentanyl being smuggled into the country, which is heroin's killing 300 kids a week on average in the United States. Fentanyl is killing people instantly. A great back of my mind, what would keep me up at night kind of fear is fentanyl laced in the water system somewhere or in the food delivery system somewhere, because it's so small and so destructive and so deadly. I really fear what could be done with that. We also have the cartels. We have gang members. We've had over 4,000 homicides and murders, and then we've had over 30,000 sexual assaults in the last 2 years and over 100,000 violent assaults by illegal immigrant criminals. Now, I wanted to be clear, not the 98% that don't abide by our laws or respect our borders, that just want a better life for them and their families. That's 98%. But the 2% are involved in drug dealing, killing, human trafficking, sex trafficking, young girls. Well, that's what we need to stop.
Right, but I think we also let's go to the basics. We have every right to control our border. We're a sovereign nation. Part of being a sovereign nation is you get to define your border. And I think this is one of the things that people tend to forget. And so I'm actually going to go a step further than you do and say, look, I think it's right. It's totally okay for the United States to say, we're going to get total control of our border. We're going to allow people to come in, as the president has said. He is for legal immigration. Most legal immigrants, by the way, are very much against those who break the law and try to jump the line because they think it's cheating. And they think it's exactly the opposite of what they did because they obeyed the law and they were patient and they did the right thing. So I want to start with the first principle. Does the United States have the right to define and control its border? Well, that's the definition of a country. I mean, if you can't define who you are and you can't control your border, you're not a country. And I think this starts there. The president has concluded that while it would be better to have the Congress act in a mature way, pass something positive, that the current Congress is incapable of doing that. And so he's exercising executive authority within a totally legal framework to reallocate money that already has been approved by Congress and to move it to this particular project. And I have zero doubt that in the end he will be upheld by the Supreme Court.
And the great part of it is, and nobody likes the bill. The bill's a typical Washington swamp bill, and they spend too much money, and they tried to lard this up too with obstacles for the president, although they were able, as I understand it now, to get a lot of that removed, which is pretty good. But if we follow the law, and there's any number of them, including 10 USC 284, Section B7 and beyond, where it literally construction of roads, fences, installation, barriers, installation, lighting to block drug smuggling, that gives the exact purpose to the President of the United States. So I will assume the Ninth Circuit won't follow the text of the law passed by Congress, which is constitutional, or the fact that as Commander-in-Chief, the President has the authority, especially because he has a sworn oath to protect the country. There are people dying, and we are being targeted by massive amounts of drugs. And finally, somebody has said, I've had enough, and is willing to go to the mat. And in the interim, he's going to have all these extra monies that he explained earlier today, up to $8 billion on top of the $1,375 billion. And he's going to continue construction while this works its way through the courts. And I would believe the Supreme Court has to deal with this. I don't think they get away with ducking a national emergency that deals with the power of the presidency and the role as commander-in-chief of the president.
No, and remember, in the bill that was just passed, they had a dramatic increase in the money that's available for ICE to control the border. They had a dramatic increase in the entire Department of Homeland Security. They had a substantial increase in the number of spaces set aside for illegal aliens that are criminal. So there were a lot of very specific big wins in that bill. And there were some things that got muddled. I mean, early on I had these reports from good friends of mine who said, that the way the bill's been written, any mayor can stop the fence in their city. That's not the case. That's where the Democrats were. But the fact is, by the time they got done, it said you have to consult with the mayor. And then, frankly, if the mayor doesn't want to go along, you consult it and you go ahead and do it anyway. So I think that on every single one of those things, as I understand it, Senator McConnell got them to back down. He got them to take out the poison pills. And I would say on balance that this is, when you write these kind of bills, they're never pretty. You're never happy with it, and it's not an exercise in good government. But I would say that on balance, this turns out to be a victory for Trump. And more importantly, these are key steps in protecting the country and in strengthening the Department of Homeland Security.
All right, hang on, Mr. Speaker. We'll come right back. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, will get more of his thoughts, obviously, on the border declaration by the president today, as I predicted. And the media is saying, oh, he's listening to Hannity. You people are so dumb. It's so laughable. All right, as we continue with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, let me move on to the other big issue that I've spent a lot of time on television last night getting into in a very deep way, and that is the revelation, a story we have been investigating and proving for 2 years, that there is a deep state. There were a group of people that conspired to put the fix in and not indict Hillary Clinton for real obvious crimes she committed, the Espionage Act, certainly obstruction of justice when she had subpoenaed emails and she deleted them and she acid washed the hard drive and beat up her devices and removed SIM cards. So they had a favored candidate, and then they used her bought and paid for Russian dossier to influence the American people to get a FISA warrant. It was never verified. They never told the court that she had paid for all of this. It was unverified, uncorroborated. They put a FISA warrant in. They wouldn't have gotten through without it. So they committed a fraud on the court. They lied to the American people with that false information before the election. Then they lied to a court to spy on a Trump campaign associate. And then they used it as a roadmap, still unverified, to bludgeon President Trump as an insurance policy after he got elected.
Look, I think one of the things everybody in America has to come to grips with is that President Trump represented a rebellion by the American people against a national establishment that was quite willing to break the law and do whatever it had to do, and has been doing it ever since. I think, for example, in the House, if the Democrats really want to move forward with committees to investigate, quote, Russian influence, the Republicans ought to say, terrific, let's start with the Clinton Foundation, with Bill Clinton going to Moscow to get $500,000. Let's start with the Clinton dossiers that were paid for by the Clinton campaign. And let's start by interviewing various FBI agents who were clearly involved in this. It is, I think, one of the great scandals. I mean, if the news media was not so deeply, passionately anti-Trump, they would be having a field day right now with one of the greater scandals in American history.
Yeah. Let me ask you. By the way, you've now started a podcast. What are you trying to take over my business? Are you gonna? Am I going to be a guest on your podcast? How's that going to work?
Well, I hope you will at some point. I just decided that podcasts have become so popular, and that they're such a positive way to tell stories, and so it's called Newt World, and people can go to newtworld.com, or they can go wherever they get their podcasts. It's free. They can sign up for it. We'll do about one a week. The first one we released today is on George Washington, and as you know, I've written 3 novels about Washington and done a movie called The First American about Washington. And so I'm going to take positive ideas. We just taped this week a long interview with Patrick Kennedy, which is one of the most emotional and powerful interviews on addiction and recovery and his family, and it's just remarkable. So it's a vehicle where I can try to go back to sort of being Newt the teacher, explore ideas and explore specific things that I think will be of great interest to people. And every week we're going to visit something new and different. We just finished interviewing some doctors who are doing gene therapy, and in one case have developed an approach where children who are blind literally now can see. I mean, it's like a miracle. And so I think people will find these to be they're different than the normal political stories, and different than the things we fight over in Washington. There's a lot going on in the world that's worth talking about beyond politics.
All right, and next time we'll have you on, obviously we got a lot to talk about with the new Green Deal.
Sure.
Newt Gingrich, thanks for being with us. Congrats on the podcast, and